Hi everyone, Leah here from EurekaCrystalBeads.com with another fun beading video for you. Before I get started, just a quick reminder to go check out the rest of our channel, and if you like what you see, hit that subscribe button and notification bell and you'll always know when we're posting new content. Okay, so today what I have for you is a fun earring design, and those of you who follow us on Facebook, on our Facebook page, or happen to be part of our new Facebook group, the Beaders Nook at Eureka Crystal Beads, which you're going to want to join if you haven't already. We're having a ton of fun in there. We just started our first group exclusive giveaway today, so you're going to want to go take a peek, and we'll link you below to that. Those who follow us on social media got a preview of this earring last week, and the promise was that I would be filming it this week, so that's what we're doing today. And I asked for name suggestions, and the name that sort of seemed most appropriate based on a couple of the associations people had looking at it is it's going to be called the Mirror Mirror earring, because a couple of people thought that the patina on the Rivoli looked like sort of an old antique mirror. And then of course the shape of the earring sort of looks like a hand mirror. So this is going to be the Mirror Mirror earring. So I'm going to go over what it's going to use. First of all, we are using a Japanese cylinder bead here. This particular one is a Toho Eiko. You could also use a Delica as well. We have a selection of both of them, and we'll link you below to everything that I used in the video, the exact colors and everything. So we have our cylinder bead there. I have a Miyuki 15 seed bead. And for this particular project, I do recommend a Miyuki 15 over a Toho 15 only because there is a hair difference in size, and the Miyuki 15 is a little bit smaller, and so it's going to help us pull in our Rivoli just a little bit easier. We also have the fabulous new 2mm Swarovski pearls. This one is in, not only is it in their new size, the 2mm, but it's also in their new color, the Tahitian, the iridescent Tahitian look pearl. Then of course we have the little stars of the show. We have a 14mm Rivoli in crystal white patina, which I am in love with. I think it's amazing for winter. I think it would also be super striking for summer too, but I just keep thinking winter with this one. It has a beautiful, let me try to get you a really good view, a beautiful patina on it that actually is sort of like a crystal AB, but just in this gorgeous textured finish. And then I have a little Swarovski 8mm chaton in white opal, and then my little ear wire. As far as everything else, I have a pair of chain nose pliers. That'll just be for attaching my ear wire later. I of course have my shears, which will cut my fire line. I of course have my fire line. I'm using 6-pound fire line in crystal, which is the whitish color. Then of course I have my trusty, very well used, well loved beater's wax. And for those of you who have never used beater's wax before, this is really nice for helping to keep tight tension, or at least that's what I tend to use it for. And of course I have a side for my dark fire line and a side for my light fire line, so the dark that rubs off from the smoke fire line doesn't get onto my white fire line. All right, so just to give you another good look, what we're going to be starting with is the top part of the earring here. This is a Peyote bezel that we're then going to be embellishing with some of those beautiful pearls. And then I'm going to show you a really nice little way to bezel around a Swarovski chaton using some square stitch. It's one of my favorite ways to bezel around chatons. So let's get started. All right, I'm going to empty out some of these beads, then move these off to the side so they don't affect my focus, meaning the camera focus. Okay, we'll leave these for now. Okay. Now with a 14mm Rivoli, we are going to need 36 of our cylinder beads. And like I said, in this case, these are the Toho Eikos. Okay, I've loaded on my 36 cylinder beads, and I have double checked that amount. That's really important because you don't want to get, into your peyote and find out that you're off a bead or two. That wouldn't be good. So I'm going to slide my beads to within a couple inches, 2 or 3 inches of the end of my thread. I'm going to leave a tail that's long enough that I can easily weave it in later. And the way I like to start a peyote bezel is by making this into a loop. So I'm just going to tie this into a square knot. So that's right over left, and then left over right. It's like a double knot, but that second knot's backwards. And then I like to pull them down together into a knot, and then pull that knot down. So it forms my beads into a loop here. And then the last thing I'm going to do before the peyote is I'm just going to travel through another few beads. Whatever my needle just kind of happens to pop through is fine. It's really just to help pull that knot into the beadwork a little bit. And so that way I start my beadwork coming out of a bead rather than coming out of a knot in between two beads. All right, and then the last thing I just want to touch on actually is just something that can make peyote bezels trickier is when your little beaded loop here is either really, really tight or pretty loose. So really what you want to see is you don't want to see any slack in your line. You don't want to see any of the fire line in between the beads, but you don't want it so tight that it feels really stiff. So I like to make sure that I can still roll those beads easily around in my fingertips here, and that kind of helps me ensure that I'm going to have just a nice medium tension on that loop. Okay, so I'm going to go through this a little bit quicker, only because we have a lot of other peyote bezel tutorials up on our YouTube channel that go into this a lot more in depth. So we'll link you actually to a couple of those below, the most recent of which was the Noel pendant. So if you are really, really brand new to peyote or to doing bezels, I would recommend checking out that video first, because that's going to go a little bit more in depth into making the bezel. I'm going to go just a little bit faster here, but as long as you have a little bit of experience under your belt, this will probably be just fine. So if you've never done peyote before and you want to be an adventurous beginner, the essential mantra that you want to keep in your head is pick up a bead, skip a bead, go through. So I'm going to go ahead and pick up a bead, I'm going to skip a bead, and I'm going to go through. All right, so you can see where my thread's coming out. And you can see I've skipped over the next bead and I'm going into the bead after that. And pardon the yucky fire line on my fingers. It's sort of the bane of every beader's existence, right? Always a little bit of that dark fire line just kind of dragged across your thumb or your forefinger. All right, so that's what we get. So the new bead we picked up, which is that one right there, is sitting next to the bead that we skipped over. We're going to do that again. Pick up a bead, skip a bead, go through. I'm going to give you a nice good close-up. Okay, so you can see the delica that, or the echo rather in this case, the echo that my thread is coming out of, skipping over the next bead and going into the bead after that. So we're basically going into every other bead in this ring, picking up a bead every time we do it. So that's what we get. So I'm going to take a quick break from filming. I'm going to get caught up and I will come back to you in a second when I've made it to the other side. Okay, so I've gone almost all the way around my little loop here. So I have my last delica loaded onto my needle, and we have to now do our step up. And as I've explained in previous videos, a step up is a step in some stitches where you have to do one little extra step or go through one little extra bead to finish the row that you're working on, or the round that you're working on, and it'll set you up to start the next round. So if you look close, you can see that the needle is going into the bead 2 away from where my thread is coming out, which is what we've been doing. Only now I've also angled my needle into the popped up bead on the inner part of the circle as well. That's the step up, is going through that one additional bead. And as you can see, I have my bead on my needle here as well. So that is our step up, and you'll do that every time you go around. It pops that last bead right into place. Right there. Boop, right in. Okay, so now what we're going to do is a round of peyote on the inside of the ring with our Miyuki 15s. So I'll show you the first couple. And the peyote's a lot easier now because you're going through the beads that are popped up. You're not really having to dig your needle in there anymore. So you can see where my thread's coming out, and then I'm just going into the next bead that's popped up on the inner part of the ring. And that is going to stitch my little 15 right into that little spot. They sometimes call this stitch in the ditch. Okay, I'll show you that one more time before I break again. Just like that. And by using a smaller bead, that's what's going to gather the peyote in. Just as if we were using a larger bead, it would flare the peyote out. If we were continuing to use the same size bead, it would just simply build a wall and it would create a cylinder. But the smaller or the larger bead will then flare in or flare out. So that's what we're doing, or rather gathering in or flaring out. So we're gathering it inside. So I'll see you back in a minute. All right, so I have one more little spot left to fill, and this is going to be my step up. So I'm going to pick up my last little 15, and I will show you that step up closer once I get my needle in. You can see that the step up is that I went through the delica that I was already set to go through just to keep up with the peyote, but then I angled in and I went through the next bead as well, which is the first 15 that I added in this round. That's the step up. It's going back up through that very first bead, and that sort of closes off this round while we simultaneously nest that last little 15 into place. This is what we got. We have a nice little start to our bezel here. If you've never worked with the Toho Eikos before, you're definitely going to want to give them a shot. They're beautifully uniform. We have so many gorgeous colors. They're really a lot of fun. And what's nice is that they stretch pretty far in a project like this because the bezels don't really take up a huge amount of beads. So in those Eiko packages, you can get quite a few projects out of them. All right, so now the inside here is done. We have to work our way to the outside of the bezel. So whenever you travel through peyote, you always want to work diagonally or even just zigzagging up and down diagonally through beads. So I'm going to show you how we're going to do that. So it's the bead we want to go through next. That next delica, that's just a hair lower than the 15. And then we're going to go up that delica in the other direction. So that way we're coming out of essentially the goal, really, however you want to get there. The goal is to come up from one of the outer beads on the outside of our ring. That's just the particular way I like to do it, but that's really just your goal there. That's where you want to be. So now we're just going to go around and do a row of peyote with our Eikos. So pick up a bead, go through our next popped up bead, and I'm going to go all the way around and meet you back here in a second. All right, so I'm almost all the way around. As you can see, my little bezel here has started to cup upwards. That's because we're doing a row with the delicas again. And so, like I said before, it'll cause it to start to form a cylinder. And what I tend to do is this row, I did pull a little tighter to help that cupping start. And the way I like to hold my bezel is I just stick my thumb right in there. And that kind of encourages just the right amount of cuppage, if you want to say it like that. So I'm just going to do the last couple of beads here. You can see how I hold it. I know I get a lot of questions from people on keeping better tension and just dealing with how to hold the beads and little things that I do. So this is one of the little things I do. I'm going to try to mention these things more as I just have my thumb right into that little cup. And then the last one is our step up. Show you that from here. There we go. That's a good view of it. So you can see where my thread's coming out. I have my little bead on my needle, and then I went through the bead that I'm supposed to go through for the peyote, and then the next one up from that, which was the first delica that we added at the beginning of this step, at the beginning of this row. And you just want to give it a nice little bit of a tug. You can see that we get that nice little cup shape. So at this point, our bezel, our Rivoli should sit nicely inside of our bezel, just like that. It's where its little home is going to be. And we're now going to do a row going around again, but now with 15s, and that's going to take that cylindrical wall that we're building, and it's going to start to now pull it in again. So this way that bezel goes on the outer rim of that Rivoli. Now, I like to, at this point, hold my Rivoli in place. But you could probably get about halfway around the peyote at this point before you really had to do that. But I just like to get it in there now. So this is another thing I do actually that someone commented on. When I really try to keep nice, good tension, they notice that I tend to wrap the thread around my finger. It's just something I do and I don't even think about it. But for me anyway, that helps me keep tight tension. So we're going to go into our next little popped up bead. And the 15s are going to start to pull that bezel in right on top. You're going to start to sit right on top of the Rivoli, just along that outer rim, and that's what's going to keep our Rivoli in place. And again, if this seems like it's going a little fast for you, there's a couple of videos that we're going to link below. One is how to do a very basic beaded bezel, which is what I'm showing you here, but it will go a little bit more granular into the different steps. And then we'll link that Noel pendant, which shows it as well. Just wanted to move just a little bit faster for this one. So let me show you that. You can see how the 15s are starting to sit on top of that rim. I'm just going to keep going all the way around, and I'll come back just as I'm about to do my step up. All right. You can see we have our bezel almost done, our basic bezel anyway. And you can see I'm just at the little spot for one last 15. And then that's also going to be my step up. I'm going to go through the delicate I'm supposed to and then angle up into that 15, which is again the first bead of the row that I'm just finishing up. That's the step up to complete it. There we go. So this is as basic as a bezel can get. And again, I just want to point out how absolutely lovely that Rivoli is. It really is super stunning. It has so much fun texture, and it really does remind me of one of those old antique mirrors. Once a couple of people had suggested that in the beaders group, I was just like, wow, absolutely, that's completely accurate. So it had to be part of the name. All right, so now we're going to weave back a couple of rows. So to do that, I'm going to go right into the next delica down the side of the bezel. And then I'm going to go down one more delica after that. Okay. So if you're not completely sure which delica you should be coming out of, try to give you a nice good view. Find one of your 15s along the top rim of your Rivoli bezel, and then look at the delica right underneath it, and that's one of the delicas you want to be coming out of. So now we're going to be using some of those wonderful 2mm Swarovski pearls, and what I love about these is that they fit beautifully in between the peyote delicas of our bezel. So I'm going to pick up one of my pearls here, and we're essentially going to be doing a row of peyote on the outer rim of the bezel, but with these pearls. So I'm going to show you where to stick your needle. Get that in focus there. All right, so you can see the one that I'm coming out of, and I just kind of skipped over that little ditch that's there and just went into the next one down around the outer rim, and just boop, pops it right in. They just sit in there absolutely perfectly. So I'm gonna get a couple more in there to show you before I take another little break. Okay. And you can see how they just sit in there nicely. And they're just going to keep going around. So I'll see you back in a minute. Okay, so I've put all of my little pearls all the way around except for the last one. And this just by itself would be an absolutely beautiful earring if you wanted to stop here, but we're not going to stop here, are we? No, no, no. We're going to keep going. These little pearls are a little tricky to pick up. There we go. So I'm going to get my last little pearl nestled in there. Okay. And just Lovely. I'm loving this. So now what we're going to do is go right into the next bead, which is the first pearl that we added, because now we're going to do our little beaded loop. This is going to be a little cute loop that's going to have our ear wire connected to it. So I just pull out that little knot. So it's going to be this little loop right there. So I'm going to pick up 4 of my delicas, I'm sorry, my acos, but again, they're interchangeable here. And we're going to loop back around and into the same pearl. So that way my needle and my working thread are both coming out of the same bead and on the same side. And I have my 4 delicas, four acos on there. Okay, and I know that looks a little funky, a little small, a little irregular, but that's all right, because what we're going to do next is going to broaden up that loop and make it look a little fancy. So what I'm going to essentially do is go through this little loop all over again, but I'm going to put in a little 15 in between every single bead, starting with right now. So you can see I'm going through that first delicate, and I have a 15 right there on my needle. I'm gonna pick up another one, go through the next. I should just say cylinder bead, because otherwise I'm just gonna keep messing up and calling them delicas when they're acos. We'll say cylinder bead for now. And I have a little 15 right there, going through the next cylinder bead. Pick up another one, go through the next. And they'll just nest themselves right inside there, and they'll just pop out just a little bit, and they create the nicest little accent on our loop. Very rarely can I do a plain seed beaded loop anymore. All right, and now for the final one. So we had that little loop of 4 acos, and then we end up adding in a total of 5 15s. One between each one, and making sure we have one at the front and at the end. Okay, and I have my little seed bead right there. Right there. We get this beautiful little decorative loop, because, you know, it's all about the details here. Why do a plain little loop when we can make it look just a little bit more finished? Okay, so this particular piece is done. I'm going to weave out my thread, which I find easiest to do along the back here. I'm going to tie some half hitch knots and cut this thread off, and then the rest of this thread is going to be what I will start the bottom of the earring with. So this, what I started out with was a full wingspan, and that will take care of this half of the earring completely, and then some. I'll have some left over. So I'm going to come back to you in just a minute when I'm ready to get started on our next little bottom part here. All right, so I have all my threads secured there, both my tail and my working thread. Again, this would be an adorable little earring just like it is. It would be even a beautiful little pendant if you had your loop going the other way, or you wanted to put a jump ring through here. Be a gorgeous little simple pendant as well. But we are now going to do the bottom part here, which is the chaton setting, which uses some square stitch and a little bit of embellishment. So I have my chaton here. I'm going to load on 12 of my little acos. Okay, double check that amount there. Yep, we got 12. I'm going to bring this to within a couple inches of the end. Again, just leave a tail long enough that you can weave it in later. And just like the very beginning, we're going to tie this into a square knot to get that little section of beads into a little beaded loop. Right over left, left over right, pull it down, and then pull down our knot. And just like before I start my actual stitching, I'm going to travel through another few beads to pull that knot in. Just whatever my needle kind of happens to pop through here. In this case, it was 3 more beads. Okay. So we're going to do some square stitch here. So you want to look at the cylinder bead that you're coming out of. We're going to pick up another one, and we're going to loop back into that same cylinder bead. Let me get that in focus there for you. Here we go. Ignore that one right there. That's just my tail. Okay. I'll try to keep that out of the way. Come on, focus. There we go. And then it just pulls right down. Sometimes you have to pop it into place just a little bit, but we basically want the new bead that we picked up to sit next to the one that we looped back through. So now we have to travel up through that new bead, just like that. Let me move these things out of the way in case they're affecting my focus. There we go. Pull through, and then we're going to do that again. We're going to pick up another echo, loop back around and into the echo that you're coming out of. So your needle and your working thread are both coming out of the same bead and on the same side. Oop, there it goes. Sits right down next to it. And then go up through the new bead that we just added. And then we're just going to do that one more time. Got our little cylinder bead right here, your Toho Eiko, your Mayuki Delica, what have you. And we're looping back around through the one that we're coming out of. We pulled it right down. And then we are not going to, however, in this case, go up through the new one, because now we want to work our way back down towards our beaded ring. So we're just going to zigzag down these beads. Come on, focus. There we go. Zigzag down these beads so we can get back down to our beaded ring, and then go through the next two beads in our beaded ring. Okay, so that's what you want to see. We added a little strip of 3 beads coming off of the ring, and then we've gone back down to that base bead in the ring, the bead that we built those 3 off of, and then we're going through an additional 2 beads in our ring. So I like to call these arms. So we just built an arm, and we're basically going to have an arm coming off of every other bead in our ring. So we started with 12 beads. That means we're going to end up having 6 arms. And I'm just going to start to build the next one coming off of that bead there. I'm going to do the same exact thing. And I will see you back in a minute when I have all my arms made. Okay, so I have made my 6 little arms. We get this little starfish looking thing. And where I am now is I'm actually at the tip of the very first arm I created. So this was the last one that I did. That was number 6. And then I wove down that one. I zigzagged down those beads, went through the ring, and then zigzagged up. So I'm coming out of the tip of the very first one that I did. Now what we're going to do is start to close in this little bezel around our chaton there. I'm going to go ahead and pick up 2 15s, and I'm just going to go into the tip of the next arm. And I'm going to do that all the way around, but I'm not going to pull anything tight. I'm going to keep it nice and loosey-goosey for now. And I'll show you what I'm talking about. Just like that. Don't worry about pulling anything tight yet. You're going to find that you're addicted to doing these little chaton bezels because they work up really, really fast. And they just make the cutest little additions to your projects. So after I loaded on my last 2, I went through the tip of the very first arm again. And the way that I find it easiest to enclose my chaton into here is I put it down on my work surface. Take your chaton and put it point down. So right now I have the top of the chaton facing up. I just put my finger on top of it here, and then I pull this in. You pull your thread, the whole thing's gonna pull in. Just like that. You get this adorable little setting for your chaton. Now, what you need to do next is go through that little ring of beads around the top a couple more times to keep it nice and tight. Otherwise, if you let it go, it's going to want to loosen up a little bit, and you're going to see some of that fire line being exposed, and if that ring is not tight, your chaton could fall out. So you want to make sure that you go through all of those beads And once you go through about another 2 times or so, you should be able to let it go and that ring of beads will stay tight. If that does not happen and you let it go and it loosens up again, you're going to want to go around a little bit more. But that's your little test to make sure that you're okay to keep going, is that you can put it down and it stays somewhat tight. Okay, and I'm basically at that point. You can feel it in your fingers. I can feel it kind of right underneath my thumb that it's not loose anymore. This is what we have. Cutie little setting here. So where you want to end this step here is by coming out of one of the delicas around your ring. And then you're just going to travel down the delica right below it. So you're going to go down the next bead in that arm. Just keep everything pulled nice and tight. And now what we're going to do is another layer of beads going around the outside of the chaton. So in this case, it's going to be picking up 3 15s at a time. You're going to go through the corresponding delica in the next arm down. And that's what you get. Okay, so then way from the front, you see this nice little ring of beads adding to that little setting. And I really like this because I feel like the delicas, those arms, they sort of end up looking like a prong setting, which I think adds to the loveliness considering the shape of the stone here. And it's just such a quick little setting. Just whipping right around it. Almost done. Okay, now I'm back at the beginning. I'm just going to go through that ring again, just like we did on the front, because we want to keep this ring of beads nice and tight. So just head on through all those beads, and then after this, there's really just one more little step, which is just our little pearls. We do that. We add 2 little accents of pearls, one at the very bottom, and then the one at the top of the chaton is going to be what connects it to the other part of the earring. It's a nice little technique to use, I think. Okay. All right, so now I'm ending coming out of a delica. Okay, and I'm going to pick up 3 of my little pearls. Again, is going to be our bottom accent, which, just as a reminder, is this right here. And you're just going to loop back around through the same delica that you're coming out of. So your needle and your working thread are coming out of the same bead and on the same side. And our 3 little pearls are going to become this adorable little point. And we're going to want to go back up into them just to reinforce them, to help them sit a little more stiffly, because as you can see, they can loosen up still a little bit easily. We want to keep this all nice and tight. Good tension. And once you've gone back through it again, just head on through that same delica and then through the next grouping of beads. Because we want to head it back up to this side now, basically to the delica at the exact opposite side. And I'll give you a good close-up of that in 1 second when I get there. So you can see that I'm coming out of the delica, the exact opposite side, but also in that same next row down, that second row. Okay. And now what we're going to do is we're going to pick up another 3 pearls, only the difference is we're going to pick up one of those pearls as a loose pearl. The next pearl we pick up is going to be one that's already on our Rivoli here. So you want to find the one that's in the very center top, the very middle base of that loop, and then look at the one that's the exact opposite right down here. That's our middle pearl that we're picking up now. And this is how we're going to connect them together. And then we pick up our last loose pearl. Give you a nice good close-up. So you can see how they're going to start to come together. the same 3 pearls as the other side. That middle pearl is just one that's already happens to be on our Rivoli setting. Loop back around through that delica, and it pulls it down tight. Just like that. And then just like before, we want to go through it to reinforce it. So just head right on up into that little group of pearls again. If it starts to loosen up a little bit, once you go through that top center one and you give it a nice good tug, it'll really tighten it up nicely. Go back down the side, little side pearl here, and then through that delica again. And then we can head right back down into the chaton setting where it's going to be a little easier to tie off our thread. Just like that. Super cute. All right, so now at this point, we're just weaving out our thread. So I like to do that right in the outside of the chaton setting. I find it's the easiest place to do it. Just dig your thread, dig your needle right underneath there. Pull almost all the way through. Pull through your loop. Go through some more beads. Get underneath that, the threads in between your beadwork. Okay, so what I've done is I have woven out all threads, all tails, everything's finished, and then the last thing we have to do is really just stick our ear wire on it. So that's what I need my little chain nose pliers here for. And I'm just going to swivel open my little ear wire loop, thread it through the loop on the top of my earring, and shut it. And we have our beautiful, beautiful little mirror earrings, which again remind me of 2 antique hand mirrors. Hence mirror. So yeah, again, I'm personally in love with those patina, the crystal white patina Rivolis. I think they're fantastic for winter. So that wraps it up. That's it. Thanks for watching. Make sure to visit us on over at EurekaCrystalBeads.com for everything I used in the video, and we'll link you below to all of the products if you want to take a stab at making this. And if you make it in any other colors, please share with us on social media. We would love to see it. You can certainly send them over via Facebook Messenger. We love to see what everyone's creating, especially those who come up with really fun variations of our videos. And that's it. I hope everyone has a great holiday. See you soon. Bye.